Let's get some more now on the AUKUS story. Joining me live is the former Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Mr Morrison, thanks for your time. Are you concerned by this Pentagon review into AUKUS?
No, I'm not. It's totally within their remit, as I've said, that incoming governments do reviews. Sir Keir Starmer did a review, and that resulted in the UK government being even more committed to AUKUS. As a result of that, the issues being raised are actually very well known. It's been driven out of the Department of Defence by the Under-Secretary, and who has made clear his concerns in the past about the production rate of US submarines. And that's what their primary focus is, and that issue's been known for some time, which is why under the AUKUS agreement Australia actually funds the support of the US industrial base. So this is a known issue that definitely needs to be addressed. It's a very important issue for the US government in particular, and it's one that President Trump promised he'd fix. And so if he fixes that problem, well, then there shouldn't be any issue.
And you know President Trump, you've had more dealings than anyone in the current government, and more than most. Can you give us a read on his view when it comes to AUKUS? Is he locked in?
Yeah, I've always had that impression that he's always been very supportive. This is a Department of Defence review. This hasn't been initiated out of the White House. I mean, the White House obviously are very happy for it to proceed, and you would expect them to do that, just like it occurred in the UK. But like with any arrangement, Kieran, you've always got to keep making the case. And it's always in Australia's interest to do that, and to be making the case in terms of the interests of our partners as well. That's what we did the first time round. The first time round, it took us over a year, and that was predominantly during the first Trump administration, to convince pretty much the same people who will be involved in this review about the technical and policy and strategic merits of this. And I'd also stress they're very focused on the US submarine production rate. They're not focused on the Australian AUKUS submarine program with the United Kingdom. Pillar 2, very strong support every time I go to the US, very strong support. There's very strong congressional support as well. And I think that was demonstrated in the major regulatory reforms that we were able to get through the year before last. And so, AUKUS has been making very good progress there. So I just think it's important to keep this in perspective and not to overinterpret.
I'm sure the ambassador and others within the government would be reaching out to you. I just wonder, can you share with us what sort of advice you would give for those heading to the G7? The Prime Minister obviously, hopefully, going to have that face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump. What does he need to say?
Well, the case for AUKUS has been well made within the administration, and I'm sure he'd be well briefed on it. It's an important part of the collective deterrence that we offer with the United States and the United Kingdom, but it also buttresses what we do with the Quad and our partners in the region. So AUKUS is a real foundation stone now for the defence architecture of the Indo-Pacific. And he'd be aware of that. I mean, its function is to support that deterrence, and that deterrence is critically important to the United States. Now, the other thing about AUKUS is it's not a lowest common denominator partnership. It's a highest common denominator partnership. It requires big investments. It's a very challenging task, particularly on Pillar 1. And, hard things are hard, and there's no surprise about that. And the commitment to doing that, and more broadly across our defence commitments, is also imperative. I think that's the broader context. And so, we need to be being very clear about our commitments on continuing to increase our capabilities, because if you're not increasing them in this environment, well, you're going backwards. And it's very important that increases. And the second thing is, we have to be very clear that we share the strategic intent, which is the deterrence to aggressors in the Indo-Pacific. That was a point we'd made strongly at the time, which was well understood and well appreciated. And I don't believe that there's been any fundamental change to that. I think the tone of that has changed, but I think I think what I've heard from particularly Minister Miles on this demonstrates that intent is still there.
You touched on the concerns of the Under-Secretary of Defence. His name is Elbridge Colbys. He has expressed concern about AUKUS in the past, his scepticism. He's the one undertaking the review. Should we be worried about that? And when we talk about the defence industrial base in the US, can you clear it up for our viewers? Isn't that what Deputy Prime Minister Miles took to Washington recently with that $800 million contribution? Isn't that part of us stepping up and contributing to this program, not just asking for the submarines at the end?
Definitely. And that's a big part of the partnership. We understand that the production capacity of submarines in the US is a major issue for them, and it is. They need to get it up well above where it is today, and they have targets for that, and they need to achieve them. And under AUKUS, Australia is contributing to that. I'd be surprised to hear if there was any other defence partnership anywhere in the world that the US has where their partner is actually assisting them with their own defence industrial base. That's the nature of this commitment. This is a two-way street. There are no passengers in the AUKUS agreement. There are only contributors. And I think that's one of its key merits. I mean, AUKUS should always be held up to all other allies and partners of the United States of this is how you do it. This is the mark you need to reach in terms of these sorts of partnerships. As for Elbridge, I mean, I've known Elbridge for some years, and he's made observations in the past. He's a pretty straight shooter in my experience. He's focused on this issue. It's not about from his perspective, I'm quite certain about anything re-Australia. He's always been very supportive of the Australian alliance and very deeply appreciative of it. This is really about what can the US produce and how they can lift their own production capability, and so they can meet their obligations that have been set out under AUKUS. That's really what this is about. And so my advice is to engage with that, engage with the Undersecretary Colby and his team, just like we had previously in the past. We've got a very good case to make, and we need to make it. Now, at the sort of bilateral level, it's just, I think, incredibly important that you don't add too many other distractions to that conversation. And it's important to avoid that wherever possible and ensure that the overarching relationship is in good shape.
And keep it positive, and I guess that's the aim for the PM as he heads to North America. On the comments you made, and congrats on the King's birthday honours this week, and I know you made the remarks in relation to defence spending in an interview in relation to that, but you're saying defence spending needs to get to 3% of GDP. If this Pentagon review does firm up Hegseth's demand for 3.5% of GDP for defence spend, is that where we need to go?
It's not clear to me specifically what comprises that 3.5. In the commitments sought, particularly from NATO partners and others, that it includes a lot of what you call non-traditional defence expenditure in infrastructure and these types of things in your broader security environment, things like that. And so what it all encompasses. But I think 3% is certainly where we need to get to. I don't make that as a partisan comment. I just think it's absolutely necessary, and there's no shortage of areas where that can be filled. I mean, people announce targets, people announce commitments all the time, whether it's in defence or environment or other places. They set the goal, and then you work to achieve that goal, and you do it by investing in sensible things. There's plenty of programs and projects and capabilities, particularly those in the near term. Some have been delayed, some have been cancelled. And there's plenty of projects to get on with that will lift our capability and enable us to play our role in what is a broader partnership here in our region. I mean, Australia's defence is served by us acting in partnership with our allies. That's how it works. The idea that Australia unilaterally can undertake this is absurd. It's fanciful. And there'll be all the usual suspects who will come out today who have their various grievances with AUKUS politically or otherwise, and they'll want Australia to turn away from the US and do all of that sort of thing. And honestly, that will not assist Australia's defence one way at all. And the US has every right to go and look at things from time to time. I wouldn't overread that. And but we should understand that our defence and our security depends on our network of alliances. And as far as AUKUS is concerned, it's the strongest one and the most important one we've struck in 70 years. And it's the one that I've noticed that the Chinese in particular have really reacted to, probably more than any other I've seen. So that tells you something, I think, about its strategic merit.
When you refer to the usual suspects, it doesn't necessarily go into this question. Some people might read it as such, but your predecessor, Malcolm Turnbull, has called for a review. He says basically the US is doing it, Department of Defence, the UK's done it. Our Parliament is the least, in his words, I'll read it to you, the least curious and least informed. Time to wake up, question mark. What do you say to Mr Turnbull?
Oh, look, Malcolm's entitled to his views, and we don't always share opinions on everything, and I'd probably just leave it at that. You know, I think it's important that the Defence are making the right decisions, and AUKUS has been through all of those processes within 2 governments now. And, you know, the current government is committed to it. We founded it and obviously committed to it. And, you know, the Parliament has its processes as well. You've got 2 new administrations now in the UK and the US, and they're doing the same thing. So, you know, I think that speaks to good process.
And finally, if Mr Rudd or Mr Albanese approach you and say, look, can you assist here as an envoy to, you know, approach Mr Trump or be involved in this, is that something you're open to?
Well, I always want to support the national interest as a former Prime Minister. I think that's one of the responsibilities that you continue to hold, not in any sort of you know, official capacity, and where you can help, you do. And I've remained in very good contact, particularly with the Minister and our ambassadors, both in the United States and the UK, with Kevin and Stephen, on these issues, and always willing to assist where I can. Because I firmly believe this is very much in Australia's interests. I believe it's in the US and the UK's interests. Oh, look, our discussions...
Have they asked you to play an envoy role?
Leave them to us, and the other discussions I have in the... it's not something I'd ever get into. I mean, I think they all know and can all assume that where I can assist, given my relationships there, I will. And equally, you know, the discussions that I have with those in the United States and the UK, I keep them very, very confidential and private for obvious reasons. So you can always assume that as a former Prime Minister, I'll be doing the best I can to support that cause.
We appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Kieran. Cheers.